Hey, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be setting up the checkpoint tracker that will be keeping track of all the checkpoints in the level to ensure that the player passes through each one sequentially as defined. So with that said, let's get into it. So before we get into the video, I'm first going to go over to the BP checkpoint because I want to change something. Over here by the components, just select the trigger and then go down in the details panel. We're going to go down to the collision and then we're going to uncheck the generate overlap events because we're going to set this up in the tracker later on. And then we're going to open up the BP tracker, which is where we're going to be working on today. We're just going to set up a couple of variables and functions. We'll do the scripting in a later video. Today we're just going to set up the fundamentals. So to start with that, we're going to go down to the variables. We're going to add a new variable. We're going to call this one max laps. A lot of the variables in the tracker are going to be similar to the ones in the player controller because the two are going to communicate with each other. They're going to be passing information between themselves. And then we're going to make this one an integer, and then we're going to scroll down under category. We're going to call this custom events, custom settings, because these settings are going to be made available in the scene over here in the details panel here. So we'll be able to edit the settings from here. So it needs to be public edit. This will make it easier later on once everything is set up and you move it to a different level. So that you want to come into the blueprint, you can simply just change all the settings you want in the details panel. And then, oh, before I forget, in the viewport, go over to the viewport, and then we're going to add a component real quick. We're going to add a bullboard, which is, we're going to rename it and then just drag it over the default scene route. And then this will be the visual representation so that we know where the tracker is in the scene. And then just compile and save, and then just save all. And then we're just going to drag this into the scene. So that as you can see, when the tracker is selected, we have over here custom settings. So as you can see here, we have the max lap. Now you can define the max laps over here for the track in the level, and then continue on by the variables. Make sure that the max laps is selected, and then Control D to duplicate it so that you can make a new variable in the same category. We're gonna add the goal time, not the goal time. We're gonna add the goal time. This needs to be a float, and then Control D again. We're gonna add silver time. Control D. Bronze time. Okay. Let's float it, please. And then we're gonna add Control D once more. We're gonna add the default best lap. Control D. Default best time. Control D again. We're gonna add the map name, which is going to be a text. Control D again. I want to add a save game name. This is going to be a string. This will be the string that will define where this particular level's information is saved. And then Control D again. Then we're going to add a level music, which is going to be ambient sound object reference. And then Control D again, make sure you select it. And then we're going to add the checkpoint sound. And then for these two, we're gonna over here by the description, I'm gonna say sound file needs to be dragged into level. And then compile and save. Go over to it and then just save all, and now we can see all the custom settings that we have created are all here. And if you hover over, it says sound file needs to be dragged into level. So with that, let's just add the sound files real quick. Over here, I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call this audio, and then I'm gonna double click in there and then import the files. Now, important thing to note is that the sounds you add need to be in a WAV format. If it's not in a WAV, Unreal will not recognize it as a sound file. It will probably recognize it as a media file, which is not the same. So whatever file you get, you need to ensure that it is saved as a WAV file format. And then with the sounds added, we're gonna save all and then just drag the two sounds into the scene. I'll just leave them there. And then if we head over and click on the billboard for the tracker that represents the tracker, and you go over to the level music and you click the drop down, you can now find the two sounds that we dragged into the level. So for the level music, we're going to use the ambient sound, and then for the checkpoint sound, we're going to use the checkpoint one, and then we're going to save all that. And then once we add the script that will enable these two sounds to play, you will then have sound in our level as we go about it, so it's not dreary and silent as we play the levels. And then with that, we're going to add a couple more variables. Collapse the custom settings and then click on the new variable. The new variable, we're going to call this checkpoints, and then this variable will hold all the checkpoints for the level. So we're going to be adding all the checkpoints in this one variable, and then we're going to need an object reference to the BP checkpoint. And then over at the category, we're going to give its own category. We're going to call this checkpoints as well, and we can give it a description and say all level checkpoints need to be assigned to this variable. This will just make it so that the tracker knows how many blueprints there are, not blueprints, how many checkpoints there are in the level that the player needs to pass through to finish the race or complete a single lap, and then in which order the player then needs to pass through each checkpoint in order for it to be considered a successful race. And then collapse the checkpoints. We're going to add one more variable. I'm going to call this one total checkpoints, and we're going to make this an integer. And then this one will be used for comparison so the tracker can know how many checkpoints are left before the race is complete, or then it's going to use the total checkpoints to compare whether the race should be considered finished or not. One thing, the checkpoints under the checkpoint one needs to be publicly editable because we need access to it, and it also needs to be an array. So down here, just click that, and then by the variable type next to where the name is, click it and then change it into an array, and then compile and save. And then that's that for the variables. Everything is set up. We have all access to all the variables of it. So the checkpoints one over here that we added just now, it's currently set to 0 because we haven't added any. So if you want to add a checkpoint such as the one we added into the scene, click the plus, and then by the index, you drop down and select, and then we will add each checkpoint that we have dragged into the scene here to define how many there are, how many the player needs to pass through before they can successfully finish the race. And then we're just gonna add all the functions in here. The first function we're gonna add is the update times function. This function will pass the variables we created, the gold, max laps, and everything like that. It's gonna pass it over to the player controller so that the two of them can communicate when things need to be updated and changed. And then the next function is going to be the activate checkpoint. And then this one, we're gonna need to add something. We're gonna add an input to it. And it's gonna be an object reference to the BP checkpoint system. And we're gonna call this one next checkpoint, because this will activate the next checkpoint that has been defined or that has been added to the tracker. And then we're going to add another variable. We're going to call this one lap check. Oh, sorry. This one also is going to have an input, which we're going to define as simple checkpoint. We're going to make this an integer. This will simply just this will be the code that will check how many of the checkpoints have already been passed through and whether or not the race should come to an end or not. And then another one we're going to add, the final one is the race complete check. And then this one requires an output. We'll define this as a boolean, and then we'll name it is race complete question mark. And then this will simply verify, much like the lap check. This will then pass over to the necessary other code to say that the race is complete, and then it will show the race splash screen to say that the race is over. The player can now finally move back to the garage and start the process all over again. So with that, the tracker fundamental setup, the variables and functions have been set up. In the next few videos, we're going to be adding the code to better define the system. But for now, that's it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a comment, whether you liked it, whether you didn't like it. Let me know so that I can improve my videos, because if I improve, then I can make better content in the future as well. Thank you for watching if you watched to the end, and until the next video.